The bank was threatening foreclosure. The contractor was threatening to sue. My parents were exhausted, broke, and terrified. And then our lawyer calmly looked across the table and said, "My clients don't want the house anymore. Remove it." That single sentence shattered everyone in the room. Before we get into how that happened and why it's one of the most satisfying legal reversals you'll ever hear, do me a favor. If you've ever been underestimated, bullied by a system that thought you were powerless, or dreamed of the perfect moment where the truth finally flips the script, hit that subscribe button. Like the video, settle in. And let me tell you a story where justice didn't just win, it embarrassed the people who deserved it. This story begins in 1973. My parents weren't wealthy. They weren't connected. They were just two hardworking people who had saved enough money to finally build a modest ranch house in the country. Nothing fancy. Just a place to raise their kids, plant roots, and breathe. They already owned the land outright. That part mattered, though no one realized how much yet. A small rural bank approved the mortgage to build the house and hired a local contractor named Bob on paper. Bob was the guy. In reality, Bob was a disaster wrapped in confidence. Bob was overbooked all over town, juggling too many projects, showing up just enough to collect checks, and leaving the actual work to crews who clearly had no idea what they were doing. What was supposed to be an exciting, hopeful chapter in my parents' lives slowly turned into a nightmare, and I don't mean cosmetic issues. I mean structural absurdity. An architect forgot to erase a line on the blueprints, and the framers built an actual wall straight through where the bathtub was supposed to be. Not near it, not beside it, through it, kitchen cabinets. My mom was warned not to put anything heavy in them because instead of being anchored to studs, they were nailed directly into drywall with a few roofing nails. Through the backs of cabinets, the garage door opening, framed into the living room instead of facing the driveway. This wasn't a house. It was a collection of bad decisions stacked on top of each other. Every time my parents raised concerns, they were brushed off, minimized, patronized. The tone was always the same. "You don't know what you're talking about. This is normal, stop being difficult." Meanwhile, my mother, stay-at-home mom with two tiny kids, was stuck in a miserable rental. My dad was working 2 jobs to keep everything afloat. What should have been a joyful time turned into months of stress, tears, and quiet despair. My mom cried a lot. My dad stopped talking as much, then came the final inspection. The bank sent a representative to sign off on the house so the last payment could be released to Bob. My parents met him in the front yard and refused to sign. That's when the representative got angry. He marched up to the front door, grabbed the doorknob, and pulled. The entire doorframe, casing, everything fell off the house and landed on him. It hadn't been nailed in. It had been wedged into place. That moment should have ended everything. It didn't. Instead, the bank doubled down. Bob finally showed up personally to supervise, but it quickly became clear that Bob himself didn't know how to build a house any better than the people he hired. My parents still refused to sign, so the threats started. The bank threatened foreclosure. Bob threatened to sue my parents for breach of contract. And suddenly, 2 exhausted people with very little money were staring down a bank and a contractor who assumed they'd default out of fear. That's when my parents went to an attorney named Tom. They laid everything out: plumbing issues, electrical hazards, structural insanity. They were honest about their fear because they knew they couldn't afford a long legal battle. If this dragged on, the bank and Bob would win by sheer financial exhaustion. My dad later said that as Tom flipped through the paperwork, his face told the whole story. Furrowed brow. Long pauses, silence that felt heavy, then Tom stopped. And he smiled. "Let's get everyone together for a meeting," he said. Tomorrow, the next day, everyone sat around a conference table at the bank. My parents, Tom, the bank's representative, the bank's attorney, Bob, Bob's attorney. No one had even finished sitting down when Tom spoke. "Well," he said calmly, "my clients have decided they no longer want the house. Please remove it." The room erupted in laughter. "Remove it?" someone scoffed. "Have you lost your mind?" Tom didn't react. He reached into his folder and placed a single document on the table. A deed. My clients own the land outright. They no longer want the house. Get it off their property. Silence. Bob's attorney leaned forward, picked up the deed, read it twice, then slowly turned to Bob. You built a house, he said carefully, on land you don't own? Bob nodded. Across the table, the bank's attorney exploded. You didn't finance the land the house is on? He shouted at the bank representative. The man stammered. No? Tom folded his hands. As I said, gentlemen, you are trespassing on my client's land. I expect the house to be removed and the land returned to its original condition. Immediately, my dad said the looks on their faces were something he'd remember forever. Blank, frozen, horrified, because suddenly all the power they thought they had evaporated. Sure, the bank could foreclose on a house that wouldn't exist by the end of the week. They didn't own the land. They had no collateral. No leverage. Bob? He was even worse off. He'd already paid half the costs out of pocket. Now he was on the hook for demolishing the house and paying the bank back the money they de-advanced him. Could they have gone after my parents anyway? Technically, yes. But a foreclosure would have destroyed their own position. And forcing my parents to sign off would have meant acknowledging a house so defective it would cost tens of thousands to make. Livable money the bank knew my parents didn't have because the bank had approved the mortgage. The tone changed instantly. Suddenly, my parents were good people. This was all a misunderstanding. The bank and Bob couldn't do enough to make things right. The house was rebuilt to the original blueprints and specifications, every mistake corrected, every shortcut fixed. At no extra cost to my parents. Bob barely broke even. The bank's representative was fired. My parents signed the mortgage, this time on a house that was actually safe to live in. And Tom? He walked away with a story so perfectly devastating that it probably still gets told at attorney dinners to this day. The best part? No yelling. No threats. No drawn-out courtroom drama. Just one lawyer, one deed, and a sentence, so calm it dismantled an entire power structure. My clients don't want the house. Remove it. The lesson here is simple but timeless. Never assume the weaker party is actually powerless. Never bully people you don't fully understand. And never, ever build a house on land you don't own? If you enjoyed this story of poetic justice, hit like, subscribe, and share it with someone who loves seeing bullies outplayed at their own game. And tell me in the comments what's the most satisfying legal or personal revenge you've ever seen. Because sometimes the quietest sentence in the room is the one that hits the hardest.